everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to turn this Barbie dress. It's one of the cheapy ones I got from AliExpress. As you can see, the lace doesn't go all the way around to the back on it. And what I'm going to do is turn it into a dress to fit a Bratz doll. And by the time I've finished with it, the lace should go all the way around. It's just a little bit long for a Bratz girl, and it's a bit too big in the bodice, so we need to alter that. I'm going to show you how to do that. So you will need your doll, your dress, a needle and thread, some cotton and some pins. The first thing we're going to do is cut this seam out around here. We don't need to unpick it because this bit's too big and this bit's too big as well. If we were going to make it for a Barbie, we'd unpick the seam so that we didn't lose any of the length. So get to the back of it. And we're just going to cut around the seam, as close to the seam as you can, on the bodice to start with. So I've literally just detached the bodice from the skirt. Here's the skirt part. And now what I'm going to do is cut the seam from the top of this as well, so that we've got 3 pieces of loose material then instead of 3 pieces sewn together. So I'm going to cut up the seam at the back. And then I'm just going to trim along the top here to trim off this stitching on it so that it's not all stitched together. So just trim along the top there. The gathering has come, the pleating has come undone, but that's okay. We need to regather it anyway. So now we're left with 3 separate pieces of material. This is the underskirt part. Then we have the middle layer of lace. And then we have the top layer of lace. The top layer of lace I'm not going to alter at all. I'm going to keep that as it is. But I'm going to alter this underskirt part and this layer of lace because it's too long for the doll. We need it to come from her waist down to her feet, which are here. So I need to cut off about this much at the bottom. So here's where we need it to go. We need to save a little bit to sew onto her waistband, and we want it to come down just past her shoes to here. So we need to cut off from here to here. So I'm going to measure how much that is, and I'm going to cut that from the top of the dress, not the bottom. So here's my tape measure, and I need to cut off from about there to the bottom. So I need to cut off 1 inch. So measure from the top, 1 inch down. Pop in a pin as a guide. Do this all the way along. Here we go. So you can see I've measured down, put in a pin at 1 inch all the way along, and that's given me a guideline to cut out with. So now I'm going to cut with my scissors, cut out to my 1-inch guideline. Take your pins out as you cut, don't try and cut through your pins. So now our dress is going to be long enough for Chloe. Once we've added it to the waistband, once we've gathered it from the waistband and added it on, it's going to be the right length for her. So then we'll use this piece of fabric as a guide to cut the bottom layer of lace. You can see that we've got too much fabric at the bottom, so we'll cut that off at the side as well. So put your second layer of lace onto your underskirt, which is now the right length, and cut off the extra netting at the top there. So now my netting and my underskirt are both the same length. Now what I need to do is make sure that they're both the same width. So measure your netting on top of your underskirt, cut off the extra piece of underskirt that you've got at the end here. So just snip it to the same size as your netting. So we now have our 3 layers of skirt all the same, all the right length. There we are. So the next thing we need to do is gather the top up of the dress again. Get all 3 layers level at the top and pin them into position. So pin your 3 layers into position all the way along the top there. And then the next thing we're going to do is gather along the top there. So get your needle and thread. Make sure you've got a knot in the end of your thread there, otherwise it'll pull through. And then we're just going to gather. So in order to gather, you start off at one end and you just go in and out all the way along. So it's just in, out, all the way from one end to the other. here's my skirt part of my dress. I've gathered along the top, and I can gather that up however tight or loose I want it when I want to fit it into the bodice. So we'll pop that to one side for now. That's done for now. And now we need to work on the bodice, which is too wide for Chloe. So if you measure it round her like this, you can see that it's quite a bit too big for her. So I'm going to cut it off just here so that I've got room to turn it over just there and still have enough to add the Velcro and fasten it. So I'm going to cut it just along here. I'm going to turn that piece over, and I'm going to stitch that with my needle and thread. So just turn it over a little bit like this, and just back stitch it closed. I'll start at the bottom here and just back stitch. So you go back and then out again at the front, back to the end of the last stitch, out again at the front. Do that all the way to the top. Finish off your stitching at the top there. There we go. Snip that off. I'm going to snip this little bit off as well, that bit at the back that's sticking up there. I'm going to take this piece of Velcro off of here because there's no point in wasting it. I'll reuse that on the dress, so snip that off. I'm just literally unpicking the stitches here to get the Velcro off, and then I can reuse it to fasten the dress. So then we need to stitch the Velcro, stitch or glue the Velcro into position on the other side of the dress. I'm going to stitch it on. I'm going to do it on my sewing machine for quickness. Just pop the bodice on her inside out just to check that it fits okay, and that fits perfectly. Don't need to do any more to that at all. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to attach our gathered skirt to our top. And to do that, gather up your skirt part, and you want it to fit. I'm leaving a little bit at the edge because it doesn't come right to the edge, this top fabric doesn't, and I need to be able to put a seam in there to close up the back when I'm done. So don't start right at the edge, give yourself about ½ an inch there, and then just pin it into position. Give yourself a nice wide seam. I've allowed for a nice wide seam, so put your pins fairly well down, and then you can sew above the pins, and it'll be easy to take them out. So gather that up as much as you can. Remember, you've got to fit it all in there, all the gathers. Just gather it up and fit it onto the skirt. Don't forget to leave a little bit at the other end as well, so that you can sew up your seam. So I've left a bit each end for the seam. I've gathered it up quite tightly. I've gathered it to fit there because the Bratz waist is a lot smaller than the Barbie's. And now what we need to do is stitch that into position. You can either stitch along here with a needle and thread. Make sure you do a nice tight seam though. Don't do it loose or it'll just come undone. Or else you can do it on your sewing machine. I'm going to do it on my sewing machine for quickness. So I've now stitched along here to hold my bodice onto my skirt. So you can lift it up. Look how gorgeous that is. It is just lovely. The next thing we need to do is sew up the back seam. So I'm going to just trim off the edge here because it's a little bit too, I've left it a little bit too wide. Same on this side. I've left it quite a lot too wide on that side because the laces were different lengths here. So let's just trim that. So the next thing we need to do is to line up all your fabrics at the seam. Line them all up so that you've got them all. So I've got those two there. Then I've got the longer netting, that's in line as well. And then I've got the underskirt in line too. Pin those into position. And then we're going to sew our seam. Now this is the bottom of the skirt and we're going to sew it not all the way to the top, because if you sew it all the way to the top, Chloe won't be able to get into it. We need to stitch it up to here, the seam. Then we need to turn this bit over at the top and stitch those sides separately to tidy it up a bit. So I'm going to go and do that now. So I've sewed up my seam up here, leaving a gap at the top. And now the next thing I'm going to do is turn over this little bit of fabric between the top of the seam and the bottom of the bodice. Turn that over and stitch that into position. So here is our finished dress. So let's try it on Chloe. And here we go. Doesn't she look stunning? Look at that. It is the absolute perfect size for her. The pattern goes all the way around. We've altered it so that it goes all the way around. On a Barbie, you probably wouldn't be able to do that because you wouldn't have enough of the netting material, which is why I swapped it over to a Bratz doll, because they're a little bit smaller. And now Chloe is ready for prom. That was how to alter a cheapy China dress for a Barbie into a stunning ball gown for a Bratz doll. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.